Welcome to the Academy Software Foundation Open Source Days. This is, of course, day 2, and we are the ACES team, or part of it, and we are going to talk to you about charting a vibrant and open path for ACES 2.0 and beyond. And we are happy to participate again in the Open Source Days. We've done it for several years, and we feel a kindred spirit with the Academy Software Foundation, obviously because of our association with the Academy, and also our open source beliefs and the way that we conduct our business and our development. There's actually lots of overlap, we believe, in the community for ASWF and the ACES community. So this is really a pleasure to be able to talk to this expanded community as well as people we already know. With me today is Alex Forsythe, who's the staff technical lead for ACES, Joachim Zell, who everyone knows as JZ, of course, who's ACES Vice Chair, and I am Steve Tobenkin, the ACES Adoption Lead. We've also got Scott Dyer, who's manning the chat for us, and he will be taking questions and chat, and hopefully we'll have some interaction with you guys, and we'd like this to be an interactive session. So please use the Q&A for questions and the chat for other kind of comments and things like that. So let's get started. The discussion today is going to be about why are we here at ACES or at Open Source Days to begin with. What's new in the world of ACES, and there's a lot of things new actually, because we recently launched version 1.3. We're working with our implementation groups to get that out, and Jay-Z will talk about that, and I'll give you a little update on adoption. This is just in case you haven't been following on ACES Central and or only saw us last year at Open Source Day. So we're going to then go to what's coming with ACES 2.0, which is very exciting, and that's coming very fast. And there is a schedule on ACES Central that will talk about that. And then a discussion, hopefully, with you guys about our future. What happens after 2.0? We're starting to plan that now, and we want community involvement. We want to hear from our stakeholders. It's very important that it's not us deciding about the future of ACES. It's really a community project, and we believe that to our core. So, and we'll end up with a little bit about how you can get involved with the ACES project and with ACES development. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex and let him talk about why we're here at Open Source Days.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, so as Steve said, why are we here at Open Source Days? Next slide, please. It's important to recognize that ACES is, in our mind, an open source project, but it's not primarily a code project. We wholeheartedly support this idea of open source and the idea and spirit of open source, but what does it mean when you have a project that only a small percentage of the project as a whole is code? Most ASWF projects are code, so this is something maybe a little bit different. Next slide, please. So although the term open source was originally coined relative to open source software, this is a little quote we found from opensource.com, kind of an important resource in the open source community, that sort of more fully embodies our definition of open source and our thoughts around open source. And really, it comes down to the fact that it's about having a larger meaning beyond software to refer to this transparent and collaborative attitude for sharing knowledge. And we kind of see ACES very much fitting into that mold. As I mentioned, we're not primarily code, but a whole lot of things, methodologies, and best practices. If you can go to the next slide, Steve. we are a collection of recommended procedures, data organization philosophies, best practices for how to move information around and deal with visual information. We have algorithms, which it can be described as mathematics. And we definitely leverage open source tools. But again, it's just a piece, which is code. So the next slide. We also have these other aspects of the ACES project, which are kind of even bigger than just the project itself. Much of what we end up producing is standardized through national or international standards bodies such as SMPTE and ISO. We have an ACES logo program, which is a program to work with product partners who are going to implement ACES. And we work with them closely to make sure that the implementations are solid and consistent from one piece of software to another. And then we actually have a very large community as well, acescentral.com, which is a place where people share information, share ideas, and talk about ACES. And we actually work with, as I mentioned, the implementers through the logo program, but also content creators. We've worked very closely with people actually producing films and television shows to help them utilize ACES in a way that makes sense for their production. And finally, we do have a reference implementation, which that's the code bit, but it's a small piece of this sort of larger effort around sharing visual data in a consistent manner. So next slide, please. So what's new in the world of ACES? If we go to the next slide, we can see that we actually released ACES 1.3 in May. And the most important feature of that release was this gamma compression algorithm. It actually addresses one of the biggest issues that we've heard from our community since we released ACES 1.0. There were a couple of other minor updates to the ACES metadata file based on feedback from the field there. But that gamma compression algorithm is an extremely important bit, which helps productions deal with some of the visual inconsistencies that had been reported back to us. So we actually do have a number of ongoing working groups. One is an output transforms architecture group, which is working on a new set of output transforms. And then a bunch of implementation groups, which are trying to create documentation and guidelines for implementers implementing all of these bits of ACES so that they can do it in a consistent manner and don't have to just rely on the specification itself to figure out what to do. They can actually, get some guidance from us as to how we see it being helpful to the end users. So we have a group that's working on, for instance, input transforms and trying to provide some guidance around consistency of input transforms across manufacturers. We have the ACES metadata file implementation group, which is working on suggestions about how one might actually use these things within a workflow and provide some tools. And likewise, the common left format, similar to the AMF group, working on a set of tools and best practices for how to use the CLFs. So next slide, please. But we do have ACES 2.0 on the horizon. And the big change there is going to be the output transforms. Specifically, we're looking at trying to create a set of output transforms that have closed form inverses so that we can move forward and backwards through those transforms without any appreciable loss of information. or loss of numerical precision, maybe is the best way to put it. We've heard from our community that having a look that's more neutral as a starting point is something that's desirable. And we're working on creating sort of consistent methodologies for output transforms across display devices, be it high dynamic range or standard dynamic range, wide color gamut display devices, or more standard legacy devices. We've also got a big effort around documentation, particularly these IDT guidelines that I mentioned, and guidance on using OpenEXR compression with ACES files, for example. Right now, the specification says that OpenEXR files are to be uncompressed, but that was really that was really sort of a fact that it comes out of the fact that there was no obvious compression mechanism, standardized array, so we couldn't reference something in writing the spec. But in practice, people are using compression all the time with ACES data, and we're sort of providing guidance on how to deal with that and workflow. And then we'll have additional documentation and tools come online as they're completed. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to JZ to talk a little bit about implementation, and take it away.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for describing why we are here. I was wondering for the last 6 years. We are a team of chairing the ACES project. It's Annie Chang, our chair, Rod Bogart, and me. We are with chairs. We did split the project development or module development into groups: the architectural group, chaired by Rod Bogart, and the implementation group, chaired by me. We create these modules, these mathematical functions, and over to the hardware and software manufacturers. So it's definitely a teamwork, while each of these vendors is actually already involved developing tools and functions for ACES, going through the building blocks of ACES. At one point, they have to implement it. In the past, version 1, for example, only with architectural groups, as vendors did it by themselves, and it was the end user at the end and the vendor that is testing it. We didn't have that body in place helping with the implementation, vetting the implementation. So we are more complete moving into version 2 of ACES. We offer test materials, reference implementations. One reference implementation is OCIO V2. There was a presentation yesterday at 10:15 in the morning about OCIO V2. I'm gonna talk about it in this presentation, some slides later. Next slide, please. Here is an example of how we work with reference images, how we do implementations. Alex talked about already the Gamut mapping virtual group, development group, working group. There was a Gamut mapping coming from the white color Gamut of an raw camera signal into the other white deliverable Gamuts. Alex as well did explain that we, of course, follow the standards, go to a standard defined and called REC 2020, a different HDR version. So we now come from a white color Gamut, go to a white color Gamut to work in the middle, do to the imagery, go from area not visual to the human eye, like the CIE chart here shows the horseshoe representing the human visual system. And we go out of our color working space. That's the chart number 1 on top in the middle. We go human visual systems, also our AP1 space of ACES. The problem actually appears with ACES or without ACES. So it just happens that at the time, camera white Gamut came in, Rec 2020 came in, ACES was available. So ACES was the first tools point out that we have Gamut mapping issues, but it turns out it's with ACES or without ACES. So now this virtual working group came in and provides a solution for this problem. And in the lower left image, where we get a more natural or the natural result on how the DP would like to see this image. So test images are available to implementers. These are the manufacturers of an editor, a compositing tool, or a color corrector. We give the image before, we give the function, the image after, and have a group of implementation specialists in the ACES community checking on the images as well and give feedback. The next slide, please. And it's not only giving the function, we also need to information in the workflow. These functions should be implemented. And that's just an example again for the virtual working group. Picture before, picture after, the flow on where the function should be implemented. The function is given as well. And we have a complete circle and can confirm that the image is right. We also have technical tests, gray ramp, bars, color charts. But since the human face is like most likely 80% of a movie, we of course need to look at notches as well. But don't worry, to all the technicians on this call, there are proper test charts as well available for everybody. Go through ACES Central. In ACES Central on our webpage, you will find on the upper right side drop-down menus to find the virtual working groups, find code, find the implementation description. And then please. So now I want to give the example OpenColorO. OpenColorO is one of these complete systems which can be seen as a reference implementation for ACES. So a programmer, a system integrator, a hardware, software developer will be able to OpenColorO at ease and can that function OpenColor actually to test ACES modules, ACES functions, or ACES end-to-end color workflow. Vendors actually implement OpenColorO Direct or use OpenColorO as implementation to come themselves where we are at. It provides an accurate color process, and it's a tool used beyond visual effects vendors in 2021. So we are looking forward to have OpenColorO V2 in every household, so to say, to work in parallel, implement it, but simply use it as a reference implementation. And the next slide, please. So the product partners, actually, we can go a little bit quicker over design. There is a whole group of product partners. We have the product partner logo program, as Steve did describe before and will describe after. Everybody in this program did say sign up for it, get qualified for it, and implement the tools in the right way. Next slide, please. And again, Color OpenIO uses our system and our procedure in the same way as we have intended it, and as I did show before. And this picture, for example, shows that in OCIO version, we had a problem with the color Gamut and perhaps the dynamic range image shows. So the CTL actually is another reference function module of ACES, And we did show how the CTL, our Academy reference function, did the image processing the right way. We found an issue in OCIO v1 and OCIO v2 has the text. So again, this helps having this implementation group in place. It's actually an interaction between the developer and end user. Next slide, please. Another function I would like to talk about is the LUT format. That's actually a product which kind of developed in parallel ACES, but ACES utilizes it. Us did redesign a common LUT format function. As it shows here, we can actually use a matrix, a 1D LUT, a 3D LUT, these modules in different order. We use the ASC still heavily in ACES at large inside of the CLF program or the CLF function. The order of operation can change. The modules inside, the functions inside of the stuff are defined. So that's yet another which ACES utilizes to provide an industry common procedure to handle color transfer functions in our workflows. And now I would like to hand it over to Steve Tobenkin.
Great. So before I talk about adoption, I think it's worth just noting, summarizing a couple of these things. So if there's anybody that doesn't know, ACES is, a color management and digital file management system. So it can touch any part of a production from acquisition all the way through, an archive. And there's lots of parts in it. And we've just talked about two of them that are integral, if you will, to helping facilitate ACES that are already at the software foundation. One is OpenEXR, I think we mentioned earlier, and definitely OCIO is a software foundation project that facilitates a lot of different VFX programs to be able to use ACES seamlessly. So that's just another way that we're sort of connected, and appreciate that. In terms of adoption, for us, adoption means, people using ACES, and it's like any other open source project, I suppose, that lots of times we don't know that people are using ACES. It's a little under the hood. It's maybe a little technical. Maybe the above the line people don't know about it. So, we've actually seen some good progress in this in terms of people talking about ACES, using it and enjoying it, and then also giving us feedback how we can make it better. And that's how we got to 1.3 and eventually 2.0. Right now, we're actually feeling pretty good. Here's a very, very abbreviated list of some movies and some television and shorts that have used ACES since last year when we talked to you. Obviously, there's, huge movies, Space Jam and Fast and Furious 9. These are from major studios, Tom and Jerry. There's movies here from I think India and Vietnam, I see, Italy, France, television shows. So we are really enjoying, wide, broad and deep use of ACES around the world, which is terrific. There's a lot of people who are repeat users and who are advocates, and we really appreciate them, in particular Netflix and Universal, Marvel Studios, and some others. Very supportive, and we thank them, and we think there's more room to go, but lots of good work that's been done, and lots of good work ahead of us. So this information, by the way, is captured on IMDb. That's how we ask people to submit. And one of the trends that's kind of interesting, and this has just happened in the last year, is people are actually putting on ACES in their IMDb listing for future movies, which means, that may seem like a small thing, but to us, it's a big thing, because it means they've integrated ACES, they're planning on using it, they've probably used it before, had a reasonably good experience, and now they're using it again. So that's normalizing and becoming a part of their normal routine, which is fantastic. And it means we have a pipeline, basically. These are just a couple of the movies. There were a lot of lesser known movies that hadn't listed it. So that's very positive for us and good sign. So one of the ways that we go to market, if you will, is ACES isn't something you apply to your workflow. Particularly, it's not something you download and then apply to your files. You use ACES by using products and software and hardware that actually support ACES. So color correctors and displays and other things that are actually compliant with ACES standards. That's how you use ACES. So what we did when we first started off is to start a logo program, which intended to have several parts, one of which has launched, and that is the product partner program. And that is for hardware and software manufacturers who want to support ACES. They sign up, they tell us what they do, and we evaluate that, and then they sort of pledge to put support for ACES in their product, and they then also pledge to show us the results using these reference files that are available to them, and then when they get that and receive that and looked at it and agree it's in specification, they get logoed, if you will. They get to use the logo, and it's been a program that we think is helpful. It needs to be expanded, and part of the expansion is within the product group, and part of the expansion is to service organizations, because we've gotten a lot of inquiries from DI houses and VFX houses and dailies houses and other sorts of things that they would really like to participate and make sure that they're doing ACES, according to standards and according to how people expect it, so they get a consistent result across different crews and different facilities and things like that. So that is hopefully coming along with V2O shortly. I would like to just highlight one of the product partners. This is our newest product partner, Disguise, and they are currently working to build in support to their compositor. And we're kind of excited about this because they are a player in the virtual production AR, VR space, which is obviously, a growing space and something that ACES has been, I would say, not used so much in. So that's very exciting, and I think opens opportunities for us to talk more about different kinds of productions and different parts of the production spectrum that ACES can play in. They have released, actually, in this very, very long URL, sorry, but it's on ACES Central as well, and you could probably Google it as well. A very interesting ebook about how they manage color, how they use ACES, and it's if you're interested or in that space, it's definitely worth downloading, I think. So lastly, just in terms of adoption, one of the things that we've heard, and I think there's some truth to it, is that ACES so far has been a bit of a technical product. There's graphs and acronyms, and although we've had a lot of creative people input and participate, creative engineers as well, obviously, but creative content producers input and participate in the development of ACES, it hasn't had a real creative component to it that's been pushed. We've had this thing called the LMT, or the look modification transform, and it's existed, but with the version 2.0 that comes out, that will really come into its own life, I think. Basically, it allows you to create and trade looks, across companies or people, and obviously everyone's interested in how the final movie or show looks. This is something that is a tool that I think will support people in viewing ACES as not just a technical consistency tool, not just a matching tool, which it does really well, but hopefully a tool that enables creativity all through the process. So that's something to look for, and we're very excited about that.
Can I add to that, Steve?
Please.
And I wonder, my audio, is it better now? I pressed another button.
Yes, it is.
So Alex before did report that the new output transforms are more neutral. I would call it they are now perfectly mathematical defined, so that we know what's coming after the LMT, which now gives all post houses and creatives the opportunity and option to put their existing lookup tables and show looks into an LMT and use ACES as if they would have done productions for the last 10 years using the same lookup table, may it be a Kodak print film pre-visualization or Fuji or Agfa, whatever it is. So this functionality now helps us to get legacy color workflow pipelines implemented into ACES and achieve the same look, with the advantage of having all this modern output transforms, HDR, Rec 2020, modern cameras coming in. So I see it as a huge advantage, this development coming out with ACES 2.0. Yeah.
So thanks, Tracy. So we've got about 9 minutes left. We're going to go to ACES 2.0 and beyond, and hopefully we'll get some questions in the Q&A, and we'd love to address those. So Alex?
Yeah, so when we released ACES 1.0, we actually doubled back and talked to a lot of our most important users and contributors, and sort of did an assessment of where we were as a project. And one of the things that we did was we sort of got a long list of things that either weren't quite complete or needed to be adjusted in some way, and compiled those and came up with a top 10 sort of features requested list. And we've shared that previously, but with ACES 2.0, what we wanted to do was make sure that we addressed the biggest and most requested features that were needing addressing from ACES 1.0. So once we release ACES 2.0, we feel like we're going to be in a much better position and really have addressed all of those issues that the users had been requesting. So next slide. So really at this point, the question becomes, what's beyond? What is the future of ACES beyond 2.0? And we need your participation in order to decide that. We have ideas where we think, we could address additional use cases and make ACES even better, but frankly, the community tells us what direction we should take. We don't try to dictate what problems the system needs to solve. We respond to our community and we try to create solutions that work for the community. So we need your participation. The best place to give us feedback is on acescentral.com. That's really easy to sign up. We have a forum, we have chat, we have a website with a lot of information, but joining that community and helping us sort of plot the future is we see as critical to this open source idea. The community is what makes this sharing mechanism work. So we look forward to seeing you there. Next slide. Again, how can you have an impact? Jump in on the conversation. Share your ideas about our roadmaps that we've published to date. Offer ideas on what ACES can learn from ASWF. And just tell us what shows you're working on. As Steve said, we don't always know who, actually, I would say most of the time, we don't know who is using ACES and how they're using ACES. We learn all the time new and interesting use cases and new and interesting projects that are leveraging what we've done. But tell us, otherwise we don't know. And we would love to know how people are using this thing that we've created. Next slide.
Sorry, muted. Interestingly, we've had people, contact us or write on ACES Central that they're using it for live events. I mean, like live stage events, really having nothing to do with cinema. all kinds of recreations for architecture and renderings and things like that. So we had some people inquire whether it could be used for printing catalogs. One of the major retailers, probably the largest retailer of the world, was looking at that at one point. So, I mean, there are some sort of universal things about color and color matching and color management that ACES can help with. And, we are obviously primarily interested in moving pictures, but I think that the community can help us by telling us, what the next steps are that they want and that you want, and what we need to be building, and we need help. We need help building it. We have a group, but it's really heavily relies on some amazing people from facilities and labs and crews and VFX places. It's really quite a group to join. It's very impressive, as some of the OCIO and other ASWF projects are. So anyway, I'll got a minute or two left. I don't know if there's any questions. Anybody has any specific questions on ACES or where we're headed or where you think we should head? Otherwise, if not, we'll adjourn, and thank you very much. And I'll vamp for a minute. We'll also thank the Academy Software Foundation, everyone there, David and Rachel and Naomi, and there's others. Thank you very much for putting this on, and thanks for including us. We greatly appreciate it.
Can you share the link for ACES Central? It's actually pretty easy. acescentral.com just came up in the chat window, and it is on our final slide. On the upper right side on ACES Central, you find a drop-down menu for the virtual working groups as well. The brain power in this virtual working group is actually amazing. It's a pleasure to be part of it. It's a pleasure to listen in or work with all the scientists all around the world. We actually cover all time zones of the world, and there is a slot for everybody, may it be the camera manufacturer or the display monitoring projection manufacturers, scientists. Many VFX vendors have their core scientists being a part of these virtual working groups. So it's a brainstorming fest, I might want to call it. Join this virtual working groups, and it's really enlightening. We discuss many cases there. Not all of them come out in ACES. There's a lot of debating going on, testing, and it is a very interesting development we have going on there in ACES.
And it's a passionate group, because a lot of the people who are working on it are actually, their day job is to create films or parts of films or VFX. So they're creating something that they can use. So, they're very, very passionate about it. So anyway, see you on ACES Central. Thank you. And have a good rest of the open days. Take care.